Have you ever wondered why that coffee shop is on that corner that they're on? Or why your grocery store is located just where it is? And how do those deals get negotiated? That's what you'll see on an upcoming new series on A&E. It starts October 12th. It's called The Real Estate Commission. The star of that show is with us today. He believes he will tell you that he's the most prolific commercial real estate broker in the nation, and he has the experience and the gravitas to back that up because he brings over 2 decades as a broker, and he's the managing director at Titan Commercial Realty Group in New York. He's represented everyone from local startups to national REITs. Hey, welcome to Get Rich Education, Todd Jolette.
Thank you. And that was quite the introduction. I don't think I could top that myself.
You've got a full interview's worth of time here to live up to that, Todd. More than 10 years ago, I started living this life where it seems like everything that I say gets recorded and uploaded to the internet. And now you've gone down that same road. And, similar to that, tell us about your forthcoming reality TV and streaming show that starts next month. What can viewers really expect to see?
So there's hundreds of shows. There's over 100 shows on national TV about flipping houses, renovating houses, residential brokers. Ours is the first show ever on television to feature commercial real estate and to be entirely about commercial real estate. There's 8 episodes in the season. It follows my team at Titan and I doing actual real deals, from helping a divorce attorney search for new office space to investors to selling multifamily properties. So viewers will be able to kind of see behind the scenes and see actual documented deals as they happen, fall apart, come back together again. Commercial real estate is a $1 trillion industry hiding in plain sight. People go to the grocery store, like you said, they go to the coffee shop, they go to the gas station, they go to their office building. People use and interact with commercial real estate every single day. It's just like the air. You're not consciously thinking about it, even though you're using it almost every moment of the day.
Right. It's something that we all need and interact with. It's almost non-discretionary, whether we're buying something at a retail store or filling up at a gas station. And yeah, I think to some people, commercial real estate sounds unapproachable. And as you watch this series, you're thinking, oh, that's the life that somebody else lives. But it's really not that unapproachable. Does the series really help break that down?
It does, and we made a very conscious decision. So I represent some very large corporations, but the series follows like smaller business and entrepreneurs and seeing kind of people from the beginning or in different transitions of their business. Like, I'm growing, but you're seeing in real life actual successful business people. You're seeing them react to real situations and that kind of moment where they're like, man, I think I'm ready to grow and expand, but what if I'm wrong? What if the economy turns? The deals get larger and the stakes get higher, and every decision you make is potentially a pitfall. And yeah, so you're going to see real entrepreneurs and real business executives dealing with those decisions of, when do I move? Do I invest? Do I buy? So I love commercial real estate. I can go on and on about it. What I'll be really excited to see is if the everyday person finds commercial real estate interesting.
I know that some have called this the series that launched 5 new real estate careers already. So how transformative is this personally for you to do this show? Besides making mom proud, it probably changes how others think of you and how you think of yourself.
Well, my mom thought I was nuts to want to be on national television, but she's proud, but thinks I'm crazy, and she's probably not wrong. So how this whole thing came about was we had a show also called The Real Estate Commission that was on Facebook Watch that we averaged about 1.3 million views per episode. The premise of that show that was also called The Real Estate Commission was, can 4 successful real estate brokers take just anyone off the street and turn them into the next $100 million real estate agent? It was 2 commercial brokers, 2 residential brokers. When COVID happened, I said to Brandon in my office, who's part of the cast of this show on A&E, I was, looking back, now we know how COVID played out. But at the time, it was like they made the announcement, I'm somebody who works 80 hours a week, and I'm looking at potentially, could we be a year with not working and doing nothing? So I'm like, we really need to do something to market. I go, why don't we do a reality show about real estate? And he's like, what in the hell do you know about producing a TV show? I go, well, nothing, but the whole world stopped. There's got to be people, we must know people in TV who might be sitting at home and might be willing to help produce the show. And he started laughing. He goes, well, actually, one of my college roommates is high up at Viacom. So we called him and we put together a whole production team of 50 people in the middle of COVID, put out a casting call and filmed a show. And it did really well. And then we kind of went around to the networks and made a deal with A&E. I really wanted to show off commercial real estate and kind of show it to the average person and show them, hey, here's this thing that people can participate and be a part of. And it's a super interesting industry because, like, when I was 22, I was the youngest exclusive Starbucks broker in the country. So how you said that coffee shop that ends up in the corner, I was the guy that, you know, Starbucks would run their software and say, you run traffic counts that are available on, you know, state DOT websites. People don't realize when you're driving down the road and you see the rubber thing that goes da-dum, da-dum, that's actually either a traffic engineer or the state, and they're seeing how many cars a day, but they're also tracking to the hour on which side of the road. So like, why is McDonald's on the PM side of the road? Or why is Starbucks or Dunkin' or Seven Brew Coffee, why are they on the AM side of the road? Because they know, looking at the traffic patterns, who's going where. So when we would negotiate a deal like that, they would say, hey, here's the target markets we want to be in. I was the boots on the ground, so to speak, that says, okay, let me look up the tax records and let me look up the tax maps. I know they need 3/4 of an acre to an acre to fit on. They want to be at a traffic light. We need this many cars per day. Hey, it's great if we're across the street from a university or a hospital or a major office park or a grocery anchored shopping center. Can we get out in the out parcel? And then, you know, there's a deal structure to it. And then you negotiate the rent and how much tenant improvement dollars or what contributions the landlord's going to make to the deal. And that's kind of how we identify, you know, locations and negotiate. And as a broker, I get paid a percentage of that overall lease value or a sales transaction.
Well, talking about making decisions in the face of uncertainty, I mean, there it is. Case in point, you put together the architecture of a show like this during the pandemic, during the height of uncertainty. That was a really interesting thing that you said when you talk about how, for example, you probably do want to have a coffee shop located, I would imagine, when you're inbound on the right side of the road there, sort of for AM traffic.
100%. It's the same reason like restaurants that are more dinner-based businesses, brunch businesses will be on the PM side, the afternoon drive home, or liquor stores typically like to be on the PM side of the road because as people are going home, they pop in and just continue on their way home.
Right. That makes total sense to me. And Todd, you do have this great command of real world negotiation tactics, helping to be sure that those prime locations, sort of like we just described, play out and happen from this $2 billion in closed deals, which is a remarkable figure. And I'm sure a lot of it has to do with who you work with, who you're negotiating with. I mean, you know, Trump was negotiating Manhattan real estate deals, and now that's pretty different as he's trying to broker a ceasefire agreement among foreign nations. So you've got all these stories from working with small business owners to multinational brands. So can you tell us about how who you work with changes your approach?
Yeah, so you have to always know what your goal is. And the more research you know about who you're negotiating with and the more you understand them, the better you're going to do, right? Sometimes winning in negotiations is about winning. Sometimes winning in negotiations is just about not losing. So sometimes I have clients that say, get me that particular piece of real estate. I don't care what it costs me. Just get it under any circumstances. I don't care. I have other clients, like I represent a clothing chain that's like similar to a TJ Maxx or Marshalls. They've been around 40 years, called Label Shopper. They're in secondary and tertiary markets all over the country. They are very inexpensive and they pay very low rent and they're opportunistic. So the approach for every single deal is completely different on depending what the person's trying to do. But the tactic's always the same. I always try to, as a broker, you're in the middle. So I'm always trying to figure out what are the actual deal breakers and what's motivating this side versus that side. And then you meet somewhere in the middle. And I try to do deals where nobody feels like you bent them over a barrel, you know, and they have a vendetta for 20 years because it's a very small world and a very long life. So if you really stick it to somebody to the point where they, you know, hate you over it, you don't know what's that deal next week or 20 years from now that you really need, and find out that person is, the kid of the person you really stuck it to. And now all of a sudden that deal you need comes back to haunt you from the deal that won 20 years ago. So I try to like let people keep their pride intact. And there's a lot of like, for just general negotiations, a lot of people negotiate against themselves without even realizing it. So most people fear silence. And I always say, whoever talks first loses. So if I throw out like a number, like if you were selling me something and I said, I think my top number is $100,000. I will not speak until the other person speaks, because most people are afraid of silence. And if I throw that number out, I'm going to go, oh my God, he's not responding. That number is too low. And I'm instantly going to go, well, maybe I could pay 120, or maybe I could pay 150. I've seen people do it a million times. So when I'm negotiating against people, whatever they say to me, I never respond until they talk a second time, because I want to see how much line there is in that run before it gets to the end. And whatever number they stop at, that's where the negotiation starts. And so many people do that. They just negotiate against themselves unintentionally.
Get comfortable with silence. Oh, you just brought up so many good points there, Todd. And I think such an important one in negotiating, you sort of touched on it, is that successful negotiation is finding out what the other side wants. I mean, I might be willing to pay you full price if you give me my timeline, say you get me to the closing table in 30 days rather than 90. So terms often mean more than price. So can you speak more about how to find out what the other side wants and making sure they actually get it while still getting what you need?
So it depends on the person. I mean, generally, as crazy and dumb of an answer as it sounds is, I just ask. Anyone who's with me knows I'm a very direct person. If I won't ask you on Monday morning, how was your weekend, if I don't sincerely care how your weekend was. I'm very much a get to the point type of guy. And I find in negotiating, unless I know the person in advance or I've done research that there's somebody who likes to circle the wagons and go around, I'm kind of a very direct, right to the point kind of person. So I'll say, listen, here's things that are important to my client. What's important to you? And let me see if we can work something out that either we both can mutually agree upon and feel good about, or if we can't get a deal done, I always say I'll take a quick no over a long maybe any day. And I find most people will tell you, like, it kind of throws people off because most people are slick and sly and they kind of like circle the wagons. I think people, if they like my personality, they'll find it refreshing, because whatever I say or mean is what I say or mean. I'm not hiding anything. So when I say, listen, I have a client, this is what they want, can we get this done? You'd be amazed when you're candid with people how directly candid most people are, because it kind of throws them off and they don't really have any choice but to be honest.
Yeah, how weird. This guy actually says what he means and means what he says. A lot of people really aren't used to that type of approach. You can watch this one next.